EmMajority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
EmMajority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, February 6th, 2025. My name is Emma Vigeland, and for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Allison Pugh, author of The Last Human Job, The Work of Disconnecting in a Disconnected World. And later in the show, Zachary Foster will be back with us to talk about Trump's endorsement of ethnic cleansing in Gaza. Also on the program today, resistance against Elon's treasury coup notches a win. The DOJ agrees to temporarily restrict him and his cronies from accessing all our data after 3 federal employees' unions sued. Speaking of those unions, by the way, membership for the largest federal employee union skyrocketed in January in response to this. We're still in a horrifying situation, though, because Musk did get access, according to reporting, to the health payment systems, which include Medicare and Medicaid. Musk announces his intentions to make cuts to our federal aviation system. Yes, after those multiple crashes. Multiple! Wasn't there an issue in Seattle the other day, too?
Was that the Japan Airlines?
Yes.
Yeah, Delta, yeah.
I guess more austerity, not more funding, is what's needed to keep us safe. Experts say the U.S. aid freeze cuts off HIV healthcare for 20 million people, including 500,000 children internationally. Senate and House Republicans are already fighting over the budget package. At issue, should the tax cuts for the rich be short-term or permanent? Some Democrats are finally stepping up. Senator Brian Schatz led a filibuster over Vote's OMB nomination, and Representatives Judy Chu and Gwen Moore reportedly barged into Mike Johnson's office yesterday and demanded to be seen despite not having an appointment over Musk's treasury tinkering. Trump reverses course, says no U.S. troops will be deployed to occupy Gaza, but Palestinians will be temporarily relocated. Temporarily, sure. Netanyahu's thrilled about this, tells the United States press how much he loves the plan. Trump signs an executive order banning trans girls and women from competing in sports. A reminder, there are fewer than 10 trans college athletes in the country. A federal judge in Maryland puts Trump's executive order to end birthright citizenship on hold. Earth just experienced its warmest January on record. And lastly, in the Congo, 150 female prisoners were raped and burned to death during a mass jailbreak as rebels rapidly advance in the east. A horrifying situation there. All this and more on today's Majority Report, or should I say, an EmMajority Report. Hello, Matt. Hello, Bradley. My friends, my colleagues, my nemesis. No, I don't know. I couldn't find the third thing. Deep Thoughts writes in, hospitals rely on 65% of their revenue from Medicare and Medicaid patients because they reliably pay for approved procedures. Yes. This disruption by Musk is even
coup.
Yeah. this coup of our treasury system and the HHS, which has like a nearly $2 trillion budget, and millions upon millions of Americans rely on these services for their basic health care. I mean, the numbers in terms of Medicare and Medicaid, the people that are on those government programs, 61 million people are on Medicare, 72 million are on Medicaid, and 7 million are on CHIP, which is the Children's Health Insurance Program, which is the Medicaid equivalent. So, that's like over a third of our population that is going to be negatively affected by Musk going in and messing with these systems that are already insufficient to keep people fed with healthcare, et cetera. And we're going to be talking to Zachary in just a second about the developments as it relates to Trump and Gaza. But this was also horrifying. Yesterday, Donald Trump signed an executive order titled Keeping Men Out of Women's Sports. And notably, it looks like he's trying to recreate the Tim Walz photo op of signing free school lunches into law, where all these kids started to hug him. But in this instance, he's using all young girls to surround him. I mean, this is some image. They're all white too, which seems like... I
mean, it's his supporters, probably daughters, I imagine.
Yeah, it seems like a deliberate choice, but here he is signing that law into ban, which, as a reminder, the recount points out, would affect less than 1% of student athletes. And to say less than 1% is almost exaggerating the number of people that are going to be targeted by this.
They could just say the number.
Yeah.
Secret Service is worried about them. If we have to worry about them, we have big problems. Okay, do you want to do this? Watch what I do, and then I'm going to give you some pens, okay? You ready? What a nice picture this is, huh, Governor? You ready? We'll do a good job. Wait, let me press that. I want to make this a really good signature, because this is a big one, right?
Okay.
Is it a big one?
Whatever.
Yeah, keep going. I wanted to see what he says at the end.
Oh, I think we have a 10. We have a 10.
God bless you, Mr. President.
The daughters of the Confederacy.
Yeah. All right. That was it. He's fixated on the size of his signature, as always. Just truly the brain of a
really important stuff
an
we're
idiot.
doing.
And yeah, I mean, obviously, this is just atrocious. The population of trans athletes. This came out in the hearings. I think it was Dick Durbin that asked this question, but there are over 500,000 NCAA athletes. Fewer than 10 are transgender. Fewer than 10.
And again, we don't need America's governing bodies and political bodies to be encroaching and making, frankly, propaganda out of an issue that should be handled by athletic directors and people like that. It's just ludicrous that this is politics.
And notice how he's just surrounded by young girls, just surrounded by young cis girls. Because we've talked about this before. The trans anxiety that they try to engender and ramp up is based still and connected to notions of patriarchy. So there's an anxiety among white male conservatives about the idea of having their genitalia removed surgically that they tap into. And also this notion that how could you want to become a woman, the lesser sex? Because you notice that trans men are not really the subject of this hate campaign, and that's not to belittle what trans men go through, but this particular focus on trans girls and women in sports, it's a way to, in the same way that white women and their safety was used to justify racial discrimination in the past, and was the reason that lynchings, justification for lynchings in the South and things like that. The protection of young white girls and women is being used for hateful ends in this area as well.
No coalition in recent American history has done more to attack the rights of young women than this one.
Yeah.
With the stocking of the Supreme Court with Roe versus Wade. Who gets abortions disproportionately? It's younger women. And they are now telling you to like spy on your neighbors and rat them out. So they need to be seen doing something, because they do have still women in their coalition, and they can be satisfied, unfortunately, with this sort of complete bullshit symbolism, and which is at the price of attacking like a handful of trans people who want to be included in sports.
Yeah, and it's thankfully 15 attorneys general from blue states are issued a statement and said that they're going to protect gender-affirming care. But Trump is doing this under Title IX through the Department of Education, and essentially saying that allowing trans girls in sports, or trans women, the fewer than 10 out of 500,000 in the NCAA, is discriminating against those women. It's so paper thin when you get just like to the logic of it, because this is less than 0.002% that we're talking about here. But hey, a marginalized population that we can punch at and attack because we want to distract from the fact that we're looting the federal government and cutting taxes for the rich. Sure, we'll do that.
And we're actually coming for your freedoms, because actually we're putting Republican lawmakers and politicians between not only like people in sports who don't need it, but also people and women and their doctors.
Yeah.
And like, it's just so, it should be obvious to people what's actually happening right now. And people who think this is at all relevant for politics, that we have some sort of scourge of people misgendering themselves to play in sports, you are a lunatic.
Yeah.
You have been subscribed to hysteria, and you are being basically led around like an idiot because your votes are helpful for fascists trying to take power.
And so this was Fox News's reaction to this. Here's Jesse Waters talking to Jessica Tarlov, who's the resident liberal on the Five, about this executive order.
Jesse, what do you think?
How many trans teens killed themselves today, Jessica?
Jesus.
I didn't get my update yet. I don't know.
Well, no, because you guys said that if you wouldn't let trans teens do whatever they wanted, they were going to become suicidal. So I'm just wondering, you know, between this and the no surgeries, we should see a rash of teenage suicide this year, right? Obviously, I'm being sarcastic because that was a BS excuse. Where are the records going to go? That's what I'm worried about, because a lot of men shattered female records. Those records should be replaced.
Never happened.
Where are the Democrats protesting this? I thought trans rights were human rights, Jessica. No, they're protesting a slush fund.
Okay, all right, whatever. I mean, just the mocking of the suicide stuff is all I need to see, because I made this point on social media, and I don't, like, there's some sort of turf group that has me on alerts or something like that, and they're all coming at it with the same talking points. The suicide thing, you're holding us hostage, as if they're the victims in this instance. I mean, it's absolutely astounding. Yeah. But Jesse Waters, now he suddenly cares about the topic of suicidal ideation as it relates to discrimination based on gender identity or sexual orientation. He's just throwing that out there to make fun of the left, because he never illustrated the fact that there was a study, and have been multiple studies, by UCLA that found that 81% of transgender adults in this country have considered suicide. 42% of transgender adults have attempted it. 56% have engaged in self-injury over their lifetimes. And that is not the same proportion as cisgender people. Trans adults are 7 times more likely to contemplate suicide, 4 times more likely to attempt it, 8 times as likely to engage in non-suicidal self-injury, according to this study from UCLA. And there's a ton of other information on this front that you can look up. Is that just because they're so mentally ill. That's what the Republicans try to say as they say, like, don't come for us on gun control. It's the mental illness problem. But on this point, they don't want to help anybody. All they want to do is shove you back in the closet. That's what it is. And if suicidal ideation increases because people can't live their lives and be themselves, so be it. That's the society that they're trying to create. So just gratuitous, ridiculous. And I know personally, I have a trans man in my family who was trying to reapply for their passport, and it's not coming back. And there's concern, and they're hearing all over the place that these passports, when people tried to apply, they were being held up. And yeah, it's just going to result in more discrimination, and these 4 years are going to be extremely difficult.
Yeah, and anybody who fed into it should be ashamed of themselves.
Absolutely. All right, folks, a word from one of our sponsors before we get to our guest, Allison. Ever wonder how much of your personal data is out there on the internet for anyone to see? More than you think. Your name, your contact information, social security number, and home address, even information about your family members. It's all being compiled by data brokers and sold online. Data brokers make profit off your data. Your data is a commodity. Anyone on the web can buy your private details, and that can lead to identity theft, phishing attempts, harassment, unwanted spam calls. But now you can protect your privacy with Delete Me. I've been using Delete Me since before I even joined the Majority Report, when, my spouting off on the internet. Got to protect myself and my loved ones, and I was worried that there would be data out there about people's addresses, their names, etc. Delete Me gave me peace of mind and has been very effective in those years. Sign up and provide Delete Me with exactly what information you want deleted, and their experts take it from there. Delete Me sends you regular personalized privacy reports showing what information that they found, where they found it, and what they removed. Delete Me is not just a one-time service. Delete Me is always working for you, constantly monitoring and removing the personal information that you don't want on the internet. To put it simply, Delete Me does all the hard work of wiping your and your family's personal information from data broker websites. Take control of your data and your private and keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me. Now at a special discount for our listeners, today get 20% off your Delete Me plan by texting majority to 64,000. Text majority to 64,000. That's majority to 64,000. Message and data rates may apply. See terms for details. Again, that's majority to 64000. All right, folks, quick break, and we'll be talking to Allison. We are back, and we are joined now by Allison Pugh, professor of sociology at Johns Hopkins University and author of The Last Human Job, The Work of Connecting in a Disconnected World. Allison, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
So AI, very much in the news right now, and I think relevant because the Silicon Valley billionaires have kind of taken control of our government. I guess just as somebody that's written about this, especially from a sociological perspective, what do you observe the AI, the kind of creeping AI takeover? What does that look like to you, I guess, over the past few months?
Yeah, I guess, over the past few months, it's been a wild ride. And we've seen AI move from, it's gonna, revolutionize biology. It's helping us invent new antibiotics. It's helping us predict earthquakes, to moving much more aggressively into education spaces, into therapy, into places where you expect really to meet another human being. And that's really unsettling and really disturbing for me, especially after 5 years of research into this.
Yeah, and the therapy piece, you talk about that in your book, and that is just one of the, I think, most acute examples of this dynamic of the destruction of human connection. And that angle is what you choose to focus on versus, on our show, we're a political show, so we've talked about the labor ramifications of AI and the privacy concerns. But this lack of human connection, why did you think that was important to explore?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I am glad that people are out there talking about bias and talking about surveillance and talking about job loss. Those are the three ways people really have tackled kind of a critical view of AI and what's happening in our world today. But I saw what was missing is we are not really talking about AI's impact on relationship, on human to human connection. And I felt like when we're not talking about that, we're not we don't have our eyes open to a major risk that AI poses, which I end up calling the depersonalization crisis, which is that people don't feel seen. And, when vast swaths of society don't feel seen, then you have, populism, and you have people voting out of anger, and you have, I think it was David Brooks who wrote an op-ed like the day after the election saying, voters to elites, do you see us now? Something like that. So being unseen is a really important social kind of phenomenon, and it starts with the kind of degradation of human to human connection, that kind of connective labor that is precious and that we have to protect.
The term connective labor, that's a big, central part of your argument. Can you flesh out what that means?
Sure. Yeah. So connective labor is, really when humans see the other person as a kind of underlying engine for outcomes that we value. So that's my version of trying to get at the fact that connective labor is what's happening underneath a lot of different occupations, not just therapy. Therapy is the most obvious one. You have to feel seen by your therapist for whatever they're saying to land. But also teachers and primary care physicians, and then not just people with college degrees, but like hairdressers, and then not just people who are doing work for your well-being, but also maybe high-end sales, people working in security, like detectives or hostage negotiators. I just was really interested. I started out this book really interested in just collecting as many occupations as I could find across the economy that relied on seeing the other in some way for the outcomes that we value.
The therapy is a great example, but the healthcare piece is so relevant. I mean, United Healthcare, obviously in the news because of the killing of the CEO, was using AI to deny claims. And if you could just speak about that level of alienation, I think, and how, frankly, it exacerbates this already existing anxiety that we have in this country, that when people deal with our for-profit healthcare system, medical bankruptcy is the top cause of bankruptcy in this country. And then now, when you got to deal with the middleman that's between you and your doctor, you may not be dealing with a middleman at all. You may be dealing with an artificial intelligence system. Yeah, and that's just chilling. It's kind of the utmost example, the epitome of a kind of dehumanization trend. I understand the rationale behind it.
The U.S. government and organizations have long deployed AI in positions that humans don't like to do, jobs that humans don't like to do. So for a long time, you've had like robots even doing bomb sniffing for the army. Like we've deployed machines to help humans not have to do the bad work, the dirty work. And I guess in healthcare, that's denying people's claims. The trouble is that it taps into kind of one of the futures that I foresee for the future of work, which is the kind of distinction between thinking and feeling, and the idea that like machines are for thinking. So we'll let we'll give them the thinking jobs and humans will be doing the feeling jobs. But the trouble is that so much feeling work actually involves thinking also. And that's most captured in the idea of mercy. And if you're just about like the rational calculus, you're going to kind of miss out on occasions of mercy. And I think that, an AI who's charged with denying medical claims is a perfect example.
Yeah, and it is further disconnecting us from our humanity. And that's part of it. I mean, I guess for me, that's what I feel, at least with there are, as you say, functional uses for it. And I think that in the future, it might help with data scraping or all these things to make labor easier for people. But the concern is you write that Moneyball has come for collective labor. I like that line because it's almost like a consulting what a consulting would do, and going into different sectors of like, how can we cut labor? And usually labor is the first thing they cut. How can we cut? How can we make things more efficient? And efficiency usually just means how can we do our basic function as a service provider and cut down on overheads so people at the top can get more wealthy. And AI is like kind of a great tool for that purpose.
Yeah, I mean, the Moneyball point was actually kind of a central argument that I was making in the book, because it's not like AI just comes and goes plop and erases your favorite therapist. It's actually it follows a kind of trajectory of making those jobs worse. And the way we've made those jobs worse is essentially by trying to impose an industrial model on them. So to make them more efficient, just as you say, and to impose requirements for data collection on the very people who are supposed to be connecting to you. So a perfect example of that is like your favorite primary care physician who has to, kind of take notes in the electronic health record while they're also trying to listen to you. And I had many doctors talk to me about how they had to learn this new skill of typing, but at the same time, typing right into the computer, but not having to look while they're typing so that they can have eye contact with their patients. And we know that there's 50% burnout rate for primary care physicians, and that data entry and data requirements are a big part of that. So the kind of degradation of these jobs is what makes it more likely to be replaced or affected by AI moving in.
Go
ahead.
No. I want you to finish. Go ahead.
Well, the trouble is that these jobs, yes, they are, kind of messy, chaotic, kind of connections between human beings that aren't entirely predictable. So they're really challenging for the bottom line. And then also they require, to be effective, you can't really scale it up. You can't have like thousands of people meet the same primary care physician. And, there's a limit. There's a kind of physical limit to how much an individual person can see the other. So the it's not going to be a place where you're going to get huge productivity gains. And economists have kind of observed that for decades. The thing is, I don't mind.
Right.
It feels like we have productivity gains in the other domains, like in, how, in making clothes or making food, the point of those productivity gains is so that we can have these deeply meaningful experiences with other human beings. And that is the kind of profound meaning of that work, and how it creates community, creates dignity, creates connection with other people. That's what life is for. We're talking about teaching a child to read, helping someone, heal from their depression or from their diabetes, or, these are the stuff of life, and replacing them so that they can be more efficient feels like prioritizing the wrong thing.
Well, capitalism would say otherwise. So, I mean, that, I guess, is the central question, right? Like, is that just, is this kind of an outgrowth of capitalism and it being in this very late stage, I would say, and wealth concentrated in such a manner that these systems of alienation, it's financializing everything and deprioritizing connection.
Yes. I'm a little hopeful, or the reason why I wrote this book was to try and kind of spark some awareness in people so that they can, it's not over yet. It's not a done deal. People can still say, AI is good over here in these tasks, predicting earthquakes, et cetera. But, my favorite one was like, how they tell us how to decode sperm whale language. Great. Let's have more of that. But let's apply a connection criterion so that if AI is getting in the way of humans connecting to each other, let's say no to that. There's plenty of other things for AI to do, and that AI does well.
And the part about that, you mentioned this a little bit earlier, that I just find fascinating, is how tech sells AI is really interesting to me, because you write about how people are almost intoxicated by the way tech presents some of this stuff. Like, it's future focused, and it sounds like there is a way to solve your problems very easily with technology. Can you explain like what you found about how people relate to tech and even AI that may benefit, I think, people trying to oversell this technology and put it around us everywhere?
Yes. Yeah. I've been mentioning this in talks around the country, like when I go to bookstores and stuff, because I'm hoping to kind of arm people against the hype so that they can like recognize it and go like, oh, that's that hype, that's that hype argument, and basically there's three ways that AI is sold to us. The first is that it's better than nothing. Who's gonna, when you have an underserved population who doesn't have access to kind of good, warm, authentic, and competent human beings, say human teachers or human doctors, then let's just give them, an AI chatbot or something that will, kind of be better than nothing. And the question I have for that is, don't give other people what you wouldn't accept for yourself. Like that's really kind of solidifying and capitulating to an inequality that's needs to be addressed by other means. The second is AI is better than humans. And that is true in cases of like, AI doesn't ask for a union, AI doesn't need to sleep, AI, so it can kind of handle 24/7 requirements or, in voluminous data, et cetera. That one's a little tricky because people point out that human beings judge, and sometimes they judge wrongly, they misrecognize the other, there's sources of shame. And those are all true, especially for marginalized populations. So I don't think this is a small thing, but I also think that if we give that over to AI, then you will never be free of the shame that you feel in front of another human being. Like, we need other human beings to walk through those moments of judgment rather than, and also we know that bias and stereotyping often comes from intense time constraints. So the working conditions of these jobs create some of the bad connective labor that they've seen. And then the last one is humans, AI is better, AI and humans are better together. So that's a very common one. That's like AI will free us up for more meaningful work. And to which my question is, where is the more meaningful work than seeing the other and having the other feel seen? And so why are we automating that? And also, it's a really optimistic view of capitalism that employers are going to, kind of keep on workers who have been, whose works have been hollowed out by AI to kind of suffuse their jobs with more meaningful tasks. No, that's not going to happen. Actually, that's not the way capitalism works here.
And you hit on it too. Like the overpromising by these folks is just so self-serving, and it bugs the hell out of me. It was, I mean, back when Musk was promising Neuralink and self-driving cars in 2 years, I was saying this stuff. Or lab-grown meat is another example of like, why is our press reporting on stuff that is clearly there to advertise for investment money?
Yes.
And that's what I feel about the promises of AI. It's the practical reality is exactly what you say. But what we're being told about how like maybe it's actually, can we coexist with them? Like, the sci-fi, this invocation of like sci-fi lore, it's just silly. Yeah. But there is, for some, I would say, like with the bleakness of where we're at right now, it resembles an optimism.
That's well said.
But it's not.
The thing that I've noticed actually more in the last 6 months maybe is a kind of the message of panic, like, if you don't get on board, you're going to be left behind. And that's actually pretty common out there that I've seen. Like just recently, maybe yesterday, the day before, there was an announcement by the Cal State University program is now going to kind of bring in, chatbots for its, 450,000 students. And it's doing the language of the press release and the press coverage was like, if we don't do this hugely diverse student body will be left behind. And I'm like, having ChatGPT in an education setting is very dangerous. Think of it like Cliff Notes. Like, would you distribute Cliff Notes to your entire student body? No, because you don't want a Cliff Notes degree. There is no shortcut to critical thinking. And that's what they're kind of, kind of a widespread delivery of chatbot in an education setting is going to get you.
And lastly, on that point, how do you feel, especially you're at Johns Hopkins, you're an educator, how do you feel this kind of technological capture really of information, both our communications platforms right now, with Meta and Twitter, and then as it relates to like AI and ChatGPT, and do you notice the effects on critical thinking and this deep prioritization of the hard work of academia, or like the fact that it's not just about consuming as much data as possible, it's about reading something and then thinking about it and marinating in it, and the beauty of that, I sound like an old like person, get off my lawn, but I do feel like that degradation, I think it's a huge reason we're in this environment right now. It's so corroded.
Yeah, I mean, really what I'm seeing, it feels really related to the kind of drumbeat of kind of the denigration of higher education, which starts with the idea that higher ed is just about getting you a kind of consumer approach to higher ed. Like you just get this degree and then you can go out. But actually the point of higher ed is to kind of transform your thinking, to enable you to have critical thinking, kind of a systematic approach to data, a rigorous analysis, the capacity for rigorous analysis, a deep kind of humanistic approach to that involves empathy and understanding others. Like there's a whole host of kind of documented outcomes to getting higher ed, but getting further education, but it doesn't just happen because you're there. Like it's not just, kind of seeping in through the walls. You actually have to engage in the act of reading and writing and thinking with other people. And those are things that, have been under siege for quite some time, under attack. And because of that, we're seeing the kind of AI-ification of education. It's become a kind of weak target.
Well, the book is great. Really appreciate your time today, Allison Pugh. It's called The Last Human Job, The Work of Connecting in a Disconnected World. We will put a link to that below wherever people are listening to or watching this. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. All right, folks, quick break. And when we come back, we'll be joined by Zachary Foster to talk about Trump's plans for Gaza. We are back, and we are joined once again by Zachary Foster, historian of Palestine, received his PhD in Near Eastern Studies from Princeton University. His newsletter, Palestine Nexus, is an essential follow. You archive so much Palestinian history, which is as important as ever right now, as, Israel has destroyed basically every educational institution in Gaza. Zach, welcome back to the show. Good to see you.
Thanks so much for having me back.
For sure. So I guess we'll start here from the beginning of the week, where Benjamin Netanyahu visited the United States, met with Trump, and during their media appearances, Trump endorsed the ethnic cleansing of the Gaza Strip. Can you just give us a quick rundown of the developments from the past few days?
Well, we've all seen the press conference in which Donald Trump incited ethnic cleansing. He called for the complete removal of all Palestinians living in the Gaza Strip. Before the war, that was 2.3 million people. He threw out a figure of 1.5 million, 1.7 million, 1.8 million. It's unclear if he meant that, if he was implying the remaining Palestinians had already been killed, or if they had already left. It's unclear. We have no idea how many people are in Gaza now. But
can I just say, to add to that really quickly, people are saying, oh, you believe him now or whatever. It's not about believing him. It's that he's dumb enough to accidentally let slip what could actually be the internal numbers that they are estimating about the death toll, which, given that deficit, it would indicate 500,000. And we know that it's up well over, I would say, 100,000 at this point. It's somewhere between those two figures. That's my theory on that front.
Was it already last summer? We had a group of American physicians, some 99 American healthcare workers, report out about 118,000, if I'm not wrong.
Yep.
We had the Lancet estimate of 180,000. The answer is we just have no idea how many people are killed because we don't have heavy equipment in Gaza. You can't actually dig people out of the rubble. And even if you could, so many bodies have been completely vaporized, have completely incinerated into ash. And so it's just totally unclear how many people have been killed. Could it be upwards of 400,000 people? Yes, it could be. That is exactly what experts have been telling us for already over a year now. So it's incredibly dire, the situation in Gaza. We had reports coming out. The Euro Human Rights Watch reported just this week that that humanitarian aid is not getting into Gaza. We know that trucks are entering Gaza, but they're not actually entering the north. And much of what is entering Gaza is actually not essential equipment. The hospitals have not been replenished. There's no MRI machines going in. There's 80+% of the wells in Gaza have been destroyed. None of the equipment to repair any of the wells has entered Gaza. So the humanitarian effort is slow, and it's not meeting the needs of the population. And so, right now we have a situation in which the sitting U.S. president is declaring his intent to carry out war crimes, crimes against humanity, ethnic cleansing, on public TV. It's totally unreal. It's almost unprecedented. At least the Biden administration attempted to hide its attempts to ethnically cleanse Gaza. You recall that in the early month or two after October 7th, Blinken made his trip to Tel Aviv, and he discussed for hours and hours begging the Netanyahu administration to allow humanitarian aid to enter Gaza. But the Biden administration was totally on board with ethnic cleansing. Blinken made a trip around the Middle East, trying to convince Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, president of Egypt, to accept refugees. He tried to convince Jordan to accept Palestinian refugees. They all said no way, and they've all said no way again. Not just Egypt. Not just Jordan, which declared recently this past week that they would declare war against Israel if this plan to ethnically cleanse Palestinians was executed on. And then you saw the comments made by Saudi Arabia just in the past day or two, in which the Saudi Arabian foreign minister, wearing a keffiyeh, said, absolutely not. There's no way we're going to allow this to happen. There's no way we're going to agree to normalize with Israel unless there's a Palestinian state, something Trump lied about. He just openly stated what was a bold-faced lie, that Saudi Arabia had, in fact, agreed to some kind of normalization deal with Israel without the establishment of a Palestinian state. So Trump is totally deranged. He's unpredictable. It's unclear exactly where these comments came from. It seemed almost that Netanyahu was almost surprised by this proposition.
Pleasantly surprised.
Pleasantly surprised. Just that smirk on his face during the press conference, where he's smiling, where he's smirking, while Trump is openly declaring that Gaza will become, I don't know, some U.S. territory, annexed into the United States. I mean, it's just totally deranged.
Yeah. Seeing him smirk like that, the thoughts that were going through my brain, I'm not going to articulate it, but some vivid imagery I had. So the Jordan and Saudi Arabia, can you talk about the sincerity of their opposition? My concern is that in particular Saudi Arabia, because they don't have, they're worried about, yes, riots in the streets, but there's still no democracy there and direct way to hold MBS and that government accountable. Are you concerned that their public opposition is more window dressing than what the conversations look like behind the scenes?
There's no doubt that is correct. On the eve of October 7th, there were very, very serious, very, very high-level discussions between senior Saudi officials and U.S. officials and Israeli officials with regard to a normalization plan. There were even rumors that this had already effectively been agreed on, and there were just some details to iron out. That was October 6th, 2023. So there's no doubt, and that was coming on the heels of a 17-year-long blockade of the Gaza Strip, in which Israel suffocated the civilian population, imposing collective punishment on 2.2 million people after 4 wars in which Israel killed 4,000 plus innocent Palestinian civilians, 1,000 plus in 2008-9, 1,500 plus in 2014, many hundred in 2012, many hundred in 2021, many hundred in 2018-19. So the Saudi government has no regard for Palestinian human life, Palestinian civilian loss of life in the occupied Palestinian territories. Recall as well that it was Mohammed bin Salman who openly, I think, confessed it was a leaked report, but he basically said, I don't really care much about the Palestinians. I mean, this has been known for a long time now. Mohammed bin Salman carried out a 5, 6, 7-year-long war on Yemen, killing tens of thousands of Yemenis children. MBS has no regard whatsoever for innocent a loss of life at all. He butchered Jamal Khashoggi in the infamous murder of a Washington Post journalist in the Saudi embassy in Istanbul a couple of years ago. This is a person who has no regard for innocent life, for journalists, for humanitarian workers, for Palestinian civilians in Gaza. He is obsessed with kind of a 2030 vision in which Saudi Arabia is going to remake the Middle East. His plan is to build a city called Neom on the Red Sea coast, in which American entrepreneurs, businessmen around the world will create this kind of enclave, this almost a kind of like a little city in the desert, a westernized city where men and women will intermingle. But ultimately, that's his vision for the Middle East. It's a kind of almost a techno utopia. But it has nothing to do with human rights. It has nothing to do with women's rights. It has nothing to do with Palestinian rights. It's fundamentally about building a kind of a techno utopia to transition off the Saudi economy from oil to something else. But that's his vision. It has nothing to do with Palestinians.
That fits in extremely well with the tech billionaires, like anarcho-capitalist vision, whether it's Praxis and these other privatized cities that Andreessen and Musk and Peter Thiel are investing in. That's like Abu Dhabi. I mean, it's different, but like that's also the vision, right? More of that, more to increase tourism and not be so reliant on oil. And then if it's a tech utopia, that means surveillance and weapons technology. Then, right? Like that's the vision, is a hub of tech billionaires or tech billions, but then the surveillance and weapons technology that comes from it.
It's well known that Israel's military tech, its spy tech, is some of the most cutting edge military tech and spy tech in the world. I mean, we all know what Pegasus is capable of. They can tap any phone in the world without having the owner of that phone touch anything, tap anything, click anything. It is total surveillance. And the Saudis are already using that tech. We know that. Khashoggi's, I believe, his fiancée had her phone tapped and was being monitored by Pegasus, an Israeli spy tech firm. So we know what the goals of this Saudi administration are. They are to clamp down on any dissent whatsoever within the kingdom. They are to clamp down even on dissent from outside of the kingdom, as you saw with the Khashoggi assassination. They are to strengthen the alliance with Israel. To create a new Middle East, one in which Israel is supreme, one in which the Palestinians are completely irrelevant. But as we saw, because Trump's comments are so blatant, so overt, so with total disregard for the norms of saying things, of doing the quiet part quietly, he's blowing things up. He's actually really messing things up for Saudi Arabia. Because Saudi Arabia, like we said, isn't fundamentally interested in a Palestinian state. They don't really care about that. And Trump's just overt disregard for international humanitarian law, his open promotion of ethnic cleansing, is throwing a wrench in the Saudi plan for the future of the Middle East.
Because he's being too clear about it, right? And to be clear, the Biden administration, with some of the same folks that stayed on, like Brett McGurk, was pursuing the Abraham Accords and normalization with Saudi Arabia, which include potentially defense promises. Let's be like, you think we're entangled in Israel? Wait till the U.S. taxpayers have to say we're going to defend Saudi Arabia to our second greatest ally in the Middle East or whatever. But, they still weren't able to get that over the hump with Biden. That is what you're saying, right? Like, because the genocide of the Palestinians was active, so live streamed, so egregious, such an obvious international crime met with mass condemnation for most of the rest of the world. Is that almost more helpful in our current moment right now, to have this on the table and being like, okay, he threw down the gauntlet. Ethnic cleansing is the goal of this administration, and then maybe that boxes in MBS and Jordan and all of them.
It's fair to say that there's something particularly nefarious about saying one thing in public and doing the opposite in private. And that's exactly what the Biden administration was doing for 15 and a half months. They said in public, oh, we're pushing for a ceasefire. You recall AOC on the DNC stage Kamala Harris is doing everything in her power for a
Working
ceasefire.
tirelessly, yeah.
Working tirelessly, when in fact it was all nonsense. And there's something particularly nefarious and dangerous about that, because we let down our guard. And those of us who actually do want a ceasefire and who are gullible or naive are going to believe that. And we let down our guard and do nothing. Whereas we are seeing in real time the immunity systems kick in of Saudi Arabia, of Jordan, of Egypt, of all of Europe. I mean, when was the last time you heard a German foreign minister get up and say, no, Gaza will not be ethnically cleansed? It is, the immunity systems are kicking in. And so that's very important. It's very important to see someone say what they mean, to say what they plan to do openly, clearly, without any ambiguity, which is exactly what Trump is doing. And so, in fact, that has, I think, real benefits for those of us who care about human rights, who care about bringing an end to the apartheid regime in Israel and bringing an end to the genocidal onslaught on Gaza. Absolutely critical. And you're seeing it now. You're seeing the forces rally. For the first time, honestly, in my entire life, you're seeing the entire Arab world rally around the Palestinian cause. When has that ever happened? Can you recall the last time that happened?
Never, at the very least. I mean, my great fears are about, for example, West Bank annexation. I guess this is a good way to transition to talking about that, because that's Miriam Adelson's desire. That's why she gave Trump that $100 million. She was open about it. I mean, in her speech at that fundraiser in Bedminster, New Jersey, she was saying, I didn't even ask for the Golan Heights, and he gave it to me as a goodie, basically, last time around. It's not being reported very much, but Israel's violence in the West Bank has been escalating as the ceasefire has been tepidly holding in Gaza. What is your analysis of that dynamic?
Well, it's very clear, based on statements made by senior Israeli officials, that as a condition for agreeing to, I would call it a temporary ceasefire in Gaza, that they would be given the green light by the Trump administration to wage an all-out war in the West Bank, especially the northern West Bank, especially Jenin, especially the Jenin refugee camp. But you can expect that this will expand to Tulkarem, to the Nord Shams refugee camp, to Nablus, really pretty much everywhere in the West Bank. We're seeing Israeli military operations like we've never seen before. Really, I mean, I can't recall the last time we saw the kind of operation we've seen. Must have been probably 2002 in Jenin, when the Israeli military entered the Jenin refugee camp, going door to door and slaughtered dozens of Palestinians back in 2002 in that campaign. And we're seeing something similar now with the Israeli military entering the camp, ripping up all the roads. By the way, they did this already in July, so this is nothing fundamentally new. But it's very clear that this is a very targeted, a systematic campaign of rooting out Palestinian militant resistance in the West Bank. And it's having extreme consequences for the civilian population of the West Bank. They've increased the number of checkpoints and roadblocks in the West Bank from about 600 before October 7th. Now I think we're now up to about 900 or 1,000. They've imposed total lockdowns pretty much everywhere in the West Bank. You cannot go from Ramallah to Nablus. You cannot go from Jenin to Tulkarem. There are roadblocks and checkpoints preventing Palestinians from leaving their towns, cities, and refugee camps. We've also seen in recent months the Israeli military now using air power. Now, Hellfire missiles being being used in the West Bank. New military tactics, new military strategies. So it's a very, very worrying situation. And look,
can you talk a little bit more about that, Zach? Like that being such an escalation, because people that may not be as familiar with the distinction between like the West Bank and Gaza, Gaza's bombed all the time. The West Bank is bombed occasionally, but it's mostly this rolling violence and seizure of land and vigilantes and IDF people shooting people and killing them in a more targeted way.
The West Bank is divided into three areas. These three areas being Area A, B, and C as a result of the Oslo process. In Area C, which has about 150,000 Palestinians, Israeli soldiers and Israeli settlers have been terrorizing Palestinians on a daily basis for decades. and it's been ramping up in the past year. We've seen dozens, I think 24 communities uprooted and ethnically cleansed, primarily from Area C. We're talking more than 1,500 Palestinians ethnically cleansed from Area C in just the past 15 and a half months. Then you have Area B, places like Sebastia in the West Bank, which are now also increasingly coming under threat. We're talking about how many Palestinians in Area B? About 500,000. They're also now facing, these are the sort of semi-rural, small towns of the West Bank. They've been facing increasing attacks by settlers. And now, Area A, the area with the overwhelming majority of the population of the West Bank, the urban centers, Ramallah, Beit Lahem, Nablus, Jenin, Tulkarem, Hebron, Khalid, these areas are now facing a new level of violence, a level of violence that Palestinians in these areas have not seen in decades. These are areas like Jenin and Nablus, where the Israeli military is sending multiple, we're talking thousands of Israeli soldiers on the ground, ripping up streets, tearing up civilian infrastructure, destroying the water infrastructure, destroying hundreds of homes, destroying roads, destroying hospitals. In January, just last month, the Israeli military entered a hospital. I believe was it in Jenin, and killed 3 Palestinians. So these are undercover operations taken, carried out by the Israeli military in civilian areas. Dressed up as Palestinian civilians, carrying out the crime of perfidy in international law, which is feigning status as a civilian during armed hostilities in order to kill Palestinians. They're doing it in the West Bank. They've been doing it in Gaza, by the way, as well. Recall that in the Nusayrat refugee camp in this past summer, when when the Israeli military entered that refugee camp to rescue 4 Israeli hostages, they killed 274 Palestinians at the same time. And it was during that operation where they feigned status as both Palestinian civilians and as Palestinian aid workers. And so they're doing that in Gaza, they're doing that in the West Bank as well. It's a very frightening time right now for everyone in the West Bank. Not only because they're dramatically expanding the military campaigns in the West Bank, both in the tactics and in the methods and in the strategies in Area A, B, and C, as we already said. But we're also now getting a confirmation that the plan really is annexation. I mean, we've known this all along, but if you follow the reports of B'Tselem and if you follow the reports of Peace Now, every week, every month, the Israeli civilian administration takes another step. And people think annexation is like one day it's not annexed, the next day it is. That's not how it works.
Right.
It's an incremental process. Every week, every month, there's a new policy, a new regulation, which gradually incorporates the West Bank into the Israeli civilian administration.
And it was announced this morning that the Israeli military has been told by higher-ups to begin to plan to remove those remaining Palestinians from Gaza, and what that removal looks like is going to be incredibly violent. Can you react, I guess, to that instruction and give us some historical context about how many times Israel has tried to ethnically cleanse Gaza and they've failed? So, bad record.
Well, first of all, what we hear and what we see from Gaza is that Palestinians have no intent on leaving. Yep. And so any kind of relocation effort is going to be forcible. It's not going to be voluntary. And Israel always blurs the lines between forced relocation and voluntary relocation. They force Palestinians historically, as you pointed out. Israel has attempted to relocate, i.e. ethnically cleanse Palestinians from Gaza on countless occasions. They tried to do it in 1948. It was through American pressure. 1948, it was through American pressure. The American most senior diplomat lived in Israel at the time told the Israeli military, this is the end of the war in late 48, early 1949. No, you're going to withdraw your troops from Gaza Strip and Sinai now. And it was only because of that American pressure in 1948-49 that Gaza wound up in the hands of Egypt rather than Israel. And then in 1956, when Israel reinvaded the Gaza Strip, they went on a campaign. They slaughtered 150 Palestinians in Khan Yunis. They slaughtered another 100 in Rafah with the goal to incentivize flight. The same thinking that they adopted in 1948 was you slaughter a few hundred here, incentivize the rest to leave. They did the same thing in 1956, except 1956 was not 1948, and the Palestinians did not leave. Only about 1,000 left. after those massacres. And then when the Israeli prime minister at the time realized he could not compel Palestinians to leave by force, they started to develop plans. To figure out ways of ridding Gaza of its Palestinian refugees. When they reoccupied Gaza in 1967, they did the same thing. They developed a plan to ethnically cleanse Gaza. And that, I mean, this was at the highest levels. The Israeli cabinet met on June 18th and June 19th, 1967. They made a few decisions, one of which was we will annex Gaza after we're able to rid the population of most of its refugees. That was the decision made in June 1967, a week after Israel conquered that territory. And then from the period June 1967 to December 1967, Israel settled on a plan to depopulate the Strip. And basically from January from the end of the war in 67 until about the end of 1969, 1970, Israel compelled 70,000 Palestinians in Gaza to leave. And then from 1970 to 1972, Israel realized they weren't going to be able to compel more than that by through these incentive programs. And so they did it by force. And Ariel Sharon enters the Gaza Strip in 1971 with a plan to, quote unquote, thin out the Palestinian population in the Gaza Strip. They enter the refugee. They first entered Jabalia in 1971. They displace hundreds of families. They expel 12,000 Palestinian family members of fighters. So these are innocent civilians by Israel's own admission. They expel them to Sinai. They continue in 1972. They try more attempts in 1974 and 1976. But the whole plan all along, well into the 1990s, is to rid Gaza of its refugees. Anyone who leaves the Gaza Strip or the West Bank for more than 3 years is not able to return. They lose their residency rights. Israel has been on a constant effort over the past 56 years in Gaza and the West Bank to figure out ways of getting them out, of pushing them out, because Zionism is a political philosophy that says, how do we create a Jewish state in a land that's mostly non-Jewish? How do we create Jewish domination and Jewish control in a land that is mostly non-Jewish? Well, the easiest way of doing it is just getting rid of all those non-Jews.
By killing or by forcible transfer. And that is what Zionism is, folks. And I think people are starting to wake up to the contradictions of what liberal Zionism is and what we need to do. Although we still need one, and I was saying this before the show, the evolution in this conversation is an endorsement of a one democratic state from the river to the sea. And we have still yet to see a politician in this country make that case, even the good ones that are standing up for against genocide. That is what our solution, the solution needs to be, like South Africa. It must be imposed upon them.
One person, one vote to the United States of America is a great idea in the US, in South Africa. It's a great idea apparently in every country of the world except for one. There's only one country in the world where the United States apparently believes that one person should not equal one vote, and that's the state of Israel, where you have 3.5 million Palestinians in the West Bank, and you have 2 million Palestinians in Gaza, so you're talking about 5.5 million Palestinians who are apparently not real people. They don't deserve a vote.
They don't get to govern themselves. We get to decide who governs them. I mean, we get to decide who's going to be the governing authority, apparently, of Gaza. That was consistent with Biden and is consistent with Trump. They're too savage to govern themselves. Don't you understand, Zach? So
it's remarkable just seeing President Trump refer to the destruction of Gaza. It's a demolition site in front of the person sitting 1 foot, 2 feet away from the person who made it a demolition site with U.S. weapons.
Yep.
It's just, you're talking about the destruction of Gaza in the abstract, using the passive voice with the person who destroyed it sitting in front of you. It's a level of gaslighting and shameful behavior that I honestly just cannot recall any American president doing that kind of thing really in my lifetime.
Yeah, I guess the rule of thumb is that if there's a new low, Trump's gonna sink to it and create a new standard, within the next few days or something like that. But Zachary Foster, everybody, please check out Palestine Nexus, the newsletter. As you can hear, Zachary has done so much great work in archiving this history that, frankly, through genocide, the Israeli government is trying to erase. So I really appreciate your work, and thanks for coming on today.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, folks, with that, we're going to wrap up the free part of this program and head into the fun half, where we'll be taking your calls and reading your IMs. Matt, what is happening on Left Reckoning?
First I want to make a point about the AI and education thing that we're seeing. I'll
Sure.
put myself on camera because, this is a long-term, I think, issue with using technology to alienate people from education. Scantron tests are technological alienation that are basically making up for, if you look at elite educations, I looked at apparently UCLA has a medical school that does pass-fail, because that's really what the relationship should be between a teacher and a student. It shouldn't be through some sort of multiple choice tests or something like that could be gamed, or you could have the answers to, or you could now use AI on it, or you could just be a good test taker. It should be like an actual relationship with this teacher and a student, and we've gotten so far away from that this is like I keep saying, we're on the we part of a slippery slope on a lot of these things that we've been in for a long time. I just wanted to make that point. Also, Left Reckoning, we'll have a show for you, patreon.com/Left Reckoning, a Sunday show. And let's see, I cannot think back to what we did. I do too many shows, so I can't even remember what I did this week.
Check it out, regardless. Yeah. On ESPN today, Bradley and I will be back, and we will be giving our picks for the Super Bowl and talking about the NBA trade deadline. YouTube.com/ESPN show.
Alexander Avina was on talking about Trump in Mexico. That seems like a million years ago.
All right. Do we have Brandon and Binder? We're waiting for Binder, but we may have Brandon, who got a haircut. I can see it. Everybody's going to be able to see it soon. Can you hear us? Can you hear us, buddy? Brandon?
No, we can't. We should maybe go to the break.
Okay, wait. We can't hear you. All right. We'll go to the break. We'll fix it. Okay. See you in the fun half.
Okay, Emma, please.
Well, I feel that my voice is sorely lacking on the Majority Report.
Wait, look, Sam is unpopular.
I do deserve a vacation at Disney World. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome Emma to the show.
It is Thursday.
Yeah, I think you need to take over for Sam.
Yes, please.
No. I'm gonna pause you right there.
Wait, what?
You can't encourage Emma to live like this. And I'll tell you why. So was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. So was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
What?
Tour, sushi, and poker.
Tim's upset?
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. So was offered a tour, sushi, and
that's what we call it in the biz.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Right.
Tour, sushi, and poker.
We're gonna get demonetized.
I just think that what you did to Tim Pool was mean.
Free speech.
That's not what we're about here. Well, look at how sad he's become now. You shouldn't even talk about it because I think you're responsible.
I probably am in a certain way, but let's get to the meltdown here.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Oh my God.
Tour,
wow.
Sushi. I'm sorry, I'm losing my fucking mind. So was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Logic.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Boy. Tour.
I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid.
Tour.
I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid.
Had this debate 7,000 times.
A little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid.
Tour. I'm losing my fucking mind.
Some people just don't understand.
So I'm not trying to be a dick right now, but I absolutely think the U.S. should be providing me with a wife and kids.
That's not what we're talking about here. Okay, all right.
It's not a fun job.
Tour.
That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing.
Willy Wonka tour.
That's a real thing. That's real thing.
Real thing. What's that offered a tour?
That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing. That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing.
What's that offered a tour?
Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Rogan has done it again.
That offered a tour?
That's a real thing. That's
poker with the boys.
I think he might be blowing it out of proportion. Real thing. That's
poker with the boys. That offered a tour?
That's a real thing. That's poker.
Let's go, Joey. Tour? sushi, and poker with the boys.
Take it easy, Glenn.
Twerk, sushi, and poker.
Things have really gotten out of hand.
Sushi and poker with the boys.
Delusional.
Twerk,
Deluded.
sushi.
You don't have a clue as to what's going on. Live YouTube.
Sam has like the weight of the world on his shoulders. Sam doesn't want to do this show anymore. It was so much easier when the Majority Report was just you. You were happy.
Let's change the subject.
Right.
Rangers and Knicks doing great.
Now shut up. You don't want people saying reckless things on your program.
That's
No.
one of the most difficult parts about this show.
This is a pro-killing podcast.
I'm thinking maybe it's time we bury the hatchet.
Left is best. Violet.
Twerk.
Don't be foolish and don't fucking tweet at me and don't bitch. The way Emma has cucked all of these people, love it.
That's where my heart is. So I wrote my honors thesis about it.
Oh,
Sorry,
she
finance.
wrote an honest thesis. I guess I should hand the main mic to you now.
You are to the right of me on foreign policy.
We already fund Israel, dude. Are you against that?
That's a tougher question I have an answer to.
Incredible theme song.
Hi, Bumbler.
Emma Vigeland, absolutely one of my favorite people. Actually, not just in the game, like period.
We are back, and we are joined by our friends, Brandon Sutton and Matt Binder. Opening up the phone lines, by the way, 646-257-3920 is the number. Binder, what's happening on your shows?
Sure. So this week on Doomed, I talked about covered the Doge boys and Elon Musk's ransacking of the government. Tune in at youtube.com/Matt Binder. Also, at my newsletter, which has unofficially launched at disruptionist.com, I broke the story of how a bunch of crypto promoters were able to hijack old Donald Trump tweets in order to stick their meme coin links where you could purchase their tokens. So you were able to see, Donald Trump's tweets with a call to action to buy a meme coin that he had no association with. So you can check that out at disruptionist.com.
All right, check that out. Brandon, what's happening on the discourse?
Well, first of all, I want to say it's important that you distinguish the meme coins that he has nothing to do with versus the meme coins that he has something to do with.
Right, well, right.
Now
If
we live
you're
in a
going to
scam
invest
nation.
in a scam, you should know who's scamming you. And this one is not Donald Trump.
Right.
I like a little mystery in my scams. I like the whole, that's maybe me. I think it's a little sexier. But yeah, on the discourse, I hope you all are watching.